Modern Star Trek pretty much admits Deep Space Nine is still the franchise's outcast 32 years later. When Star Trek Deep Space Nine premiered in 1993, it immediately stood apart from every Trek series before it. Gone was the familiar premise of a starship boldly exploring new worlds. Instead, DS9 planted its characters on a space station, tied them to politics, religion, and war, and explored the messy consequences of life in a universe that wasn't always as idealistic as Gene Roddenberry envisioned. 32 years later, as modern Star Trek continues to expand across Paramount Plus, DS9 remains a strange anomaly, revered by fans and critics for its depth, but still treated by the franchise as an outcast. Modern Trek shows like Strange New Worlds, Picard, Lower Decks, and Discovery regularly draw on nostalgia for the original series and the next generation. Spock, Pike, and Kirk dominate Paramount Plus lineup, while Picard's swan song centered around a full-on TNG reunion. Even Prodigy, aimed at younger viewers, is built around the legacy of Voyager and Catherine Janeway. DS9, on the other hand, still feels like the cousin the franchise is proud of in theory, but hesitant to fully embrace. DS9's legacy is undeniable. It's ironic, because many of the risks DS9 took now define modern television. Serialized storytelling, morally gray heroes, long-running political conflicts, and a willingness to challenge utopian assumptions are commonplace in today's prestige TV landscape. Before Game of Thrones made audiences comfortable with sprawling political intrigue and deeply flawed characters, DS9 was doing it with the Byron Provisional Government, the Cardassian occupation, and the Dominion War. Even within Trek itself, DS9's innovations paved the way for Discovery and Picard. Serialized arcs, season-long villains, and characters shaped by trauma and compromise are lifted straight from DS9's playbook. In many ways, DS9 is the DNA of modern Trek, but it rarely gets the credit. Cameos don't equal recognition. Yes, DS9 gets nods here and there. Lower Decks gave fans a delightful animated return to the station in Season 3, complete with Kira Nerys in command and Quark running his bar. Picard Season 3 brought back Worf, who spent significant years on DS9, and even dropped references to Odo. But these moments feel like crumbs compared to the multi-season feast given to TNG and TOS characters. A full DS9 revival, spin-off, or continuation still seems unlikely. While Picard's crew was brought back for a victory lap, no such plan has been floated for Sisko, Kira, Bashir, or Garrett. Even Worf's DS9 years were overshadowed by his TNG roots in Picard. It's as if DS9 remains too messy for Paramount's vision of modern Trek. The station isn't about bold exploration or optimistic diplomacy. It's about the cost of occupation, the compromises of wartime, and the uneasy alliance between faith and governance. In other words, DS9 forces Trek to wrestle with uncomfortable truths that don't fit neatly into the franchise's glossy nostalgia machine. DS9's outsider status is built into its DNA. Perhaps it's fitting that DS9 is still treated like an outsider, because that's what the show has always been. From the start, DS9 wasn't about the Federation's shining future. It was about the people on the margins of that future. Bajor was a world scarred by oppression. The Cardassians were a militaristic society forced to reckon with their crimes. The Ferengi were rewritten from comic relief into a biting satire of capitalism. Even the Dominion, far from being a one-note villain, embodied the dangers of absolute control and fear of chaos. The show's characters were equally complicated. Benjamin Sisko wasn't a swashbuckling explorer. He was a widowed father, a reluctant religious icon, and eventually a man willing to get his hands dirty to save the Alpha Quadrant. Kira struggled with being both a freedom fighter and a leader. Garrick embodied moral ambiguity in every scene. DS9 didn't offer easy answers, and it didn't flinch from showing Starfleet's failures, something modern Trek often avoids. Modern Trek is afraid of DS9's darkness. Current Trek tends to celebrate optimism, heart, and accessibility. Strange New Worlds brings back episodic storytelling with a hopeful tone. Lower Decks is a love letter to Trek canon. Even when Picard or Discovery get darker, they ultimately swing back toward redemption and legacy. DS9, by contrast, often lived in the gray areas. It dared to suggest that the Federation wasn't always right, that utopia might come at a cost, and that even heroes could compromise their morals. One of the show's most famous episodes, In the Pale Moonlight, features Sisko conspiring with Garrick to drag the Romulans into war through deception and murder. It's a masterpiece of moral compromise that remains controversial to this day. Modern Trek seems hesitant to embrace that kind of storytelling, preferring clear lines between heroes and villains. DS9 deserves more than nostalgia. That's why, 32 years later, DS9 is still Trek's outcast, beloved, influential, but never fully embraced. Fans continue to champion its